feel like this is the moment that we've decided, the CDC has decided that this is going to be endemic. Am I wrong?
Yeah, I don't know that the CDC's made that judgment per se. I think that this just reinforces the difficulty CDC has had operating in this environment for the last 2 years. When you're a public health agency, you need to speak with purpose. You need to make sure that every pronouncement that you're making has some kind of bottom line public health goal or policy goal, because you can't capture the public attention for a very long duration of time. And CDC repeatedly, this is not new, CDC repeatedly has spoken just to seemingly occupy this space and not really have an intended public health outcome. I think in this case, they were getting criticism around not having a testing requirement. And rather than explaining why they didn't implement that and just sticking with their guns, they came out with this statement that was kind of mealy-mouthed and really didn't accomplish anything. I think the bottom line here from the CDC's judgment, if I had to guess what they're thinking, they recognize that about a third of people who have COVID after 5 days are still going to be contagious. They'll still be shedding the virus. And they said as much in what they put out yesterday based on data out of the UK. What they're recognizing, though, is that we're not diagnosing most of the infections that are occurring right now. We're probably diagnosing closer to 1 in 10 infections. At the best point in the pandemic, we were probably diagnosing 1 in 3 or 1 in 4. So this is an epidemic wave that's being driven by people who are mildly symptomatic or asymptomatic and are going about their business. It's not being driven by people who get sick, get diagnosed, isolate, and then leave isolation on day 7. And so they're not focused on those individuals right now and trying to control the spread from those individuals. So I think for consumers, what this means is that you need to judge your individual circumstance. If you're going to be going back into a work setting or back into a family setting after 5 days where your symptoms resolve and you think you're no longer contagious, you do have a 30% chance that you're still shedding. And if you're going to put other people at risk, you need to be more vigilant. And that includes testing and perhaps wearing a mask.
Why didn't they say it just like that? Because that makes sense to me. That is clear. That explains the risks, but also gives them understanding about how we're not necessarily going to be able to control it at this point. But the problem when the CDC comes out with, as you called it, mealy-mouthed statements like this, the CDC sets the guidelines for what every business, for what every school, for whatever local board of health goes ahead and determines things from that. And when I read what they have said, it's basically like, yeah, do what you want. Go ahead, go about your business, which means that schools, businesses, everybody else are going to pressure you if you're not going back at that point, even if you're still feeling symptomatic, because they didn't say if you still feel symptomatic, stay home. They said if your symptoms are feeling better, then maybe it's okay to go back too. I mean, I just don't understand why they don't fully explain what they're seeing and explaining what's going on. I get it. We're not prepared. We don't have enough tests for everybody to take a test and still get back to work and still have essential workers being able to do things at hospitals, at airlines, at other places. But this was guidance that they put out for anybody and everybody. And I think all it's done is add to consumer confusion.
Yeah, look, you're exactly right. Everyone's looking for something to peg their decisions to, some authoritative body. And that's the role that the CDC has traditionally played. I think what we're seeing is the limitations of that organization. This is not new. This has been going on for many years. It's become more apparent and more acute in the setting of a crisis. But CDC just doesn't speak with clarity, and they don't speak in a way that provides bottom-line advice, practical advice to consumers and businesses. I don't think they have good insight into how their pronouncements and their guidance is being interpreted and taken up in the real-world setting. So we're seeing the limitations of the organization. I mean, fundamentally, we need to reform that organization, change the way it puts out guidance, change the way it updates its guidance. That's just not happening. It's not happening in the last administration. It's not happening in this administration. And I think ultimately Congress is going to have to step in to reprogram that agency. But you're seeing, the limitations of the organization right now, and it's feeding over into frustrations among consumers and businesses and parents because they don't have good information to guide individual decisions.